Yeah.
You know, as you know, the debt
All hard questions will go to him, yeah.
As you know, the debt limit's nearing
Yeah.
expiration.
I'll talk about the debt limit next week. We're talking about the package today. I'll give you my view of the debt limit next week. Yeah.
You know, as the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill move
Yep.
on a similar sort of timeline,
Right.
does the reconciliation bill moving forward have any impact on how you may vote on the infrastructure bill, or will you evaluate that independently of this separate?
Well, since I'm in the group, there's things I'm for and there's things I'm against. President Trump had a $1.5 trillion infrastructure package. I think everybody up here understands roads, bridges, ports, particularly in South Carolina. America could use a facelift on its basic infrastructure, and there's bipartisan support for that. But with the $3.5 trillion package, it's not about infrastructure. It's about growing the size of government. It's about using an opportunity to change tax rates to be more just in their eyes. And the big loser, as Ron said, is the American consumer. So I'm for infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports paid for. I'm not for an explosion of the size of government. And as John said, the closest thing to immortality is a new government program. We all know this is never going to go away. I think this is a defining debate, one of many in the 2022 election cycle. So there'll be plenty of Republicans on board for bipartisanship when it comes to infrastructure reasonably defined. There's going to be none of us for this $3.5, really $5 trillion package. You got to ask yourself the question why. Why would you be for one and not the other? One makes sense. One will help the economy. The other will take inflation to new heights. And if you don't believe me, just ask Larry Summers. I got to run.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the one piece of leverage you guys do have, at least for the next month, is on the debt limit. Potentially, if there is a clean debt limit bill that's brought to the floor, would Republicans actually filibuster a clean debt limit increase before reconciliation happens?
Well, I think Lindsey said, and he's our ranker on the Budget Committee, that he will talk about, you've heard what Senator McConnell has said on that subject. I don't think there's any appetite among our members to vote for a big increase in the debt limit when they're in the process of adding so much to the debt. I mean, they're talking about spending $3.5, or as Ron and others have pointed out, really more than $5 trillion if you take away the budgetary gimmicks. And, you know, you would think, based on what they're talking about doing, that Bernie Sanders had won the election. I mean, this is a far left, progressive, agenda, and they're going to do everything at 51 votes. And my view is, and I can't speak for all our members in our conference, is that the debt limit ought to ride on all the other stuff they want to do. I don't think Republicans want to enable them to spend trillions and trillions of dollars that we believe are simply designed to grow government.
Well, let me just quickly, because I'll address it a little bit as well, seems we're the only two that stuck around here. Since I've been elected, since I came here in 2011, we've increased or suspended the debt ceiling 9 times. I came here with $14 trillion in debt. Now we're, fast approaching 30. I think about $28.5 trillion worth of debt. In the past, and I think the reason you have something called a debt ceiling is when you reach it, you think long and hard about increasing it. And in the past, for example, the Budget Control Act, during one of those fights over increasing the debt ceiling, we actually instilled some fiscal discipline and reduced discretionary spending for a couple of years by having a real fiscal discipline. So from my standpoint, I can only speak for myself, if we increase the debt ceiling, we ought to get some measure of fiscal control. And we've had discussions. You've got the Romney Trust Act. You've got Full Faith and Credit Act. Rick Scott has a piece of legislation. One of the things I would propose is the Preventing Government Shutdown Act, a very common sense proposal. I think we passed it twice out of my committee when I was chairman of Homeland Security. And all it does is it says if you can't get your act together, pass a budget, pass appropriation bills, you don't shut down government, which costs a lot of money. It's very inefficient. A lot of people get hurt. You just fund those agencies at last year's level. Entirely reasonable. Now, for some reason, it's been hard to get a vote on that. This would be a good time to get a vote on something like that. I think we're probably done.
All right.
Okay, one more.
One more question. Do you think, it sounds like Democrats want to do the debt limit increase by regular order. Is this a way for them to kind of broaden responsibility for the debt you talked about today?
Well, I think they would like to, anything to get Republican fingerprints on all these crazy policies that they're proposing. And I don't know why any Republican would want to allow that to happen. You know, the debt limit has in the past been carried on reconciliation. And in light of the context of what we're talking about here, which is, as I said before, the biggest expansion of government, biggest tax increase in American history, and doing it all of it 51, and furthermore, believe it, they would do it in a New York minute if they had the votes. They would get rid of the legislative filibuster, and they'd pass their entire agenda at 51. So I don't know why Republicans would want to help, as I said, enable the massive amount of taxing that they want to do and the incredible harm that we believe it would do to the American economy and to American consumers who are going to bear the cost both of higher taxes but also higher prices for everything as inflation continues to take off. This is a prescription for disaster, I think, economic disaster, but they seem bent on plowing forward with it, and I think it's a big mistake.
I mean, you could just vote against the final bill
Uh-huh.
and have it be, you know, bills don't have to pass with 60 votes. You can just not force a cloture vote. There's a vote, and then you force them to walk the plank. It'd still be a 51-50 issue.
And I'm not saying none of those. I don't think anything other than what Senator McConnell has said about this. You know, that, as Lindsay said, that's prospective. That's down the road, and I don't think any final decisions have been made about how that might be handled on the floor. But I'm just telling you, as a matter of principle, I don't think there's a single Republican senator who views increasing the debt limit so that Democrats can expand government and spend massive amounts of money is something that they, in the end, would want to support.
Last question.
Can I do one on the,
Last question.
going back to the 3.5 real quick? So economists are saying that the twin legislation packages will provide, quote, a massive boost to the economy, and both are essential. Families use the stimulus checks from the American Rescue Plan, benefited from those. Democrats say there's continued help in these plans, child care, et cetera. How do you explain it to families in your states being against these plans and these packages here?
Well, we've increased debt over the last 18 months by $5 trillion. In 2020 alone, personal savings increased $1.6 trillion. Per capita real disposable income increased something like 5.5%. So there is so much money sloshing around. We don't need more stimulus. I mean, that's what Larry Summers talking about. We have way too much money, quite honestly, sloshing around versus the supply of goods that are out there. That's what's going to spark inflation. So we just don't need all this spending. What we ought to do is make sure we have a competitive tax system. Let's not overregulate the economy. You know, let's end the disaster at the border. I mean, there are problems we need to fix in this country. One of the problems that doesn't need fixing is we don't need more money in the economy. It has plenty. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.